All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the session today. Today, we are hearing Leveraging OER to Enhance Equity in Dual Enrollment by Jennifer Zinth and Jenny Parks. So thank you so much for being here today. The presenters will introduce themselves as soon as the recording notification goes, so you'll hear a little bit more about them in just a moment. But just want to welcome everyone and give a gentle reminder that the code of conduct is in effect for this session and all sessions. So just keep that in mind as we go ahead. All right, thank you so much. And can we please start the recording?
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. We are in the unenviable time slot of being precisely post-lunch, but thank you all for being here, those of you virtually and those of you in person. Oh, yes, please come in. So my name is Jenny Parks. I'm supposed to be co-presenting with our researcher, Jennifer Zinth, and Jennifer's childcare fell through and she couldn't attend, but she was going to do this virtually. And then she came down with some type of horrible gastrointestinal malady and can't even join us virtually. So I will do what I can to represent what she has researched, but I will say there's a paper forthcoming on this. So if you want to sign up for our updates, etc., we will get you the specifics at that point. So a little bit of background on both me and Jennifer. Jennifer is one of the preeminent researchers in the nation on issues of dual and concurrent enrollment. She has a long history of working with many, many organizations in that field. I work in the area of dual enrollment sometimes, but I also work in the field of open educational resources as well. So I'm the one who tries to wed these various strands of research and high impact practices. So it says on my name that I'm from MEC, M-H-E-C. It's the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. And someone already asked before our session began, what's a MEC? Well, MEC is one of the 4 regional higher ed compacts in the nation. So if you are from a southern state, you're served by the Southern Regional Education Board. If you come from the Northeast, you are served by the New England Board of Higher Education. If you're in the West, you're served by WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Ed. And if you're one of the 12 Midwestern states, you are served by MEC. I'm the VP of Policy and Research there. And hi, come on in. The higher ed compacts are quasi-governmental entities. Our members are actually our states, and they pass statutes and they cede certain rights and opportunities to us. And so we are an instrumentality of state government, but we're also 501c3 nonprofits. So we occupy this strange space, but we're all governed by commissions where at least half of the commissioners are legislators. So we are the ones who can bring state government, the SHEO entities, the state higher education executive offices, the institutions, everyone together in one place. And that's really our job, is to keep these various constituencies in conversation with each other and to make sure that they have what they need to do their jobs. So, thank you, Abby. So Abby knows me well. We've worked together for many years on OER stuff. So she will be my helper. Thank you very much. So let's get started. This is leveraging OER to enhance equity in dual enrollment. So I'll just give you a real quick idea of what we'll do here in the next 30 minutes. We'll do a temperature check. I need to figure out how much you know about. I'm assuming people know about OER here. If you don't, you need to correct me there. But I'm going to make sure that we're all on the same footing when we talk about dual or concurrent enrollment, and then we can look at OER in the context of that practice, and then we'll look at some strategies that we can use to increase the use of OER in dual enrollment settings. So first of all, by a show of hands, how familiar are any or all of you with dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment? So we can start with one. I know almost nothing. Good. Well, let's go to the other end. I know about it and I've worked in that area of education. Anyone? Oh, okay, good. So those of you who have not raised your hands, tell me with your fingers, are you a 2, a 3, or a 4? 4, 3, 2. Okay, all right. Okay, that's good for me to know. Then just raise your hand or jump in and let me know if I say something that doesn't seem to make sense. As you well know, we're in education, so there are acronyms and there are a lot of terms that are very specific to our subfields, and I don't want to leave anyone out. So, of course, dual enrollment's an umbrella term for college courses offered in high schools to high school students. Well, it's not always offered in a high school. It's offered to high school students, and it could be, there can be a lot of different variations. It can vary by where and how the course is offered and the type of instructor. Is it someone who is normally housed at the institution, or is it a high school instructor who has been credentialed by and not exactly employed by, but is endorsed by the institution? Does that all make sense? Yeah, good. Well, just to make sure, for those of you who are not actively involved in the dual enrollment world, dual enrollment has been flowering in recent years and expanding rapidly in most states in the US. And this is because it benefits all kinds of folks who are involved in post-secondary, but also K-12 education. A real quick review of the types of things and benefits that you get when you have a good, robust dual or concurrent enrollment program. It's early exposure to students to college, to its rigor, to its expectations. Sometimes it will spark interest about college participation among students who might not have seen themselves as college-going material. It lets them explore career opportunities earlier. We also know that they are more likely, according to research, to apply to, be admitted to, and actually attend and complete college. So all four of those things, all four of those stages are elevated when statistically when a student is exposed to at least one dual enrollment course. And it also increasingly in states that have really robust programs, there are actually articulated pathways where you can start sometimes as early as your sophomore year and start taking courses and graduate into especially career and technical fields right away, get into the workforce. Obviously, it's a benefit to families because it reduces the cost of a college education. Depending on how your state funds dual and concurrent enrollment, it might cost families zero. But it's always going to cost more than having your student go as a post-secondary student and attend a post-secondary institution. It also helps high schools. They get to offer more advanced courses, so it helps them do some of the things they would like to do, but they don't always have the faculty or the funds or the infrastructure to do that. And it really, it tends, if it's implemented well, it really does bump up the rigor and the quality of advising. We do know that that's one of the main variables with concurrent and dual enrollment, that you've got to have really great, what you call navigational aids, so that people are not just doing what for years was called the random acts of dual enrollment. You're not just taking something to take it, but you're doing it in an optimal way that leads to a specific outcome that you are pursuing. And then, of course, it helps post-secondary institutions. It builds a pathway to recruitment. It also lets them share practices. There are a lot of times, if you get really good partnerships, they're learning from each other. You know, the high school teachers maybe are picking up some additional content from the folks they're working with at the institution. And I've heard from many institutional folks, they're learning a lot about pedagogy, andragogy, and effective teaching from their high school partners. So it's a win-win all around, except we know that there are huge equity problems in offering dual enrollment. We will get back to that. Again, if you're thinking about the dual enrollment of years past, it's very, very different now. Years ago, it was only for advanced learners. It was only for, now this kid's already taking calculus and he's a junior. What are we going to do with him, right? That's not who it mainly is anymore. In fact, that's rarely who it is. It used to be just gen ed courses, and they were primarily on a college campus. The student would travel there and you'd have your younger student in there taking it in taking a course in the context of a university or a community college. And traditionally, the family paid the tuition. And there were a lot, it was traditionally female, suburban, and other types of privileged students. Nowadays, it is a much wider group of folks who are taking advantage of dual and concurrent enrollment. It's for both high and middle achieving students. It's gen ed and CTE courses. It is often at the high school, and in some states, it's almost exclusively at the high school. Iowa being one where the primary model is, I'm pointing to Abby because she works in Iowa, and I will say the state in the nation that's done it the longest, the best is Iowa. So we're lucky to have Abby here, and you'll begin to hear what they're doing with OER and dual enrollment too, because she has agreed to share that with us. Some to all of the costs now can be paid by the state, which is great. That's a big equity issue there. And but it's still difficult equity-wise to make sure every student in every high school has an equal opportunity to a high-quality dual or concurrent enrollment experience. And that can be for any number of reasons. It's most difficult to offer these courses at small rural high schools, as you can imagine. There are also issues with credentialing teachers. That's really the field I've been working in most for the last 10 years, because there are a lot of times the accreditor will say, well, this is what you have to teach a 100, 200 level course. These are your credentials. And most high school teachers don't have that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, if you look at, and I'm most familiar with HLC, Higher Learning Commission, the big, what used to be a regional accreditor. But in 2015, they came out and made it very clear, you need to have a master's degree in the field you're teaching, or you need to have a master's degree of any sort and then 18 graduate credits in the field you're teaching. This is particularly relevant for high school teachers because that's how I started my career. And I can tell you, high school teachers don't generally have master's degrees in their content fields. They have master's degree in curriculum and instruction or educational leadership, educational technology. And so that 18 credits became a real barrier for a lot of folks when that change was made in 2015. However, in 2023, HLC softened its language on that. And that's a whole nother set of things for another day. But I do webinars and newsletters and everything on that too. So you can also look me up if that's of interest or concern to you. So dual enrollment and textbooks is where OER comes in. And we specifically think of it as an equity issue. Of course, we know there are all kinds of ways that using OER can address equity. But in the case of dual enrollment, we can go right back to that cost issue. But it's different from doing it in a traditional college classroom because you now have these satellite classrooms, often located in the high school, often taught by a high school teacher. How do those kids get their textbooks and their learning materials? Now, it will vary somewhat, but overall, the bulk of the decision rests in the institution. So whatever, let's say it's going to be a calculus course, and you have a set of high schools that are pairing with an institution. Whichever calculus text is used on that campus in those classrooms is the same one that needs to be in those high school classrooms. This is for all kinds of reasons, but the regional accreditors or the once regional accreditors and often state policies make that an explicit way to say that's how we know they're doing the same thing. And so again, we've got multiple pieces here. Yep, those teachers have to have the same credentials or similar credentials. They have to use the same or very similar learning materials. And of course, NACEP, if any of you are familiar with NACEP, the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships, they're the only accreditor of concurrent and dual enrollment programs, and that is one of their requirements. So I wanted to pause. I'm going through a lot of stuff here just to get you to the point, making sure that you understand the context. Okay. Do we have any online people asking questions? Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So how does this become a barrier for students? Well, it's a barrier for students in much the same way it is at the post-secondary level, because the cost of some of these textbooks is extremely high. And it is different from taking an advanced course in your high school, right? Even an advanced high school textbook does not cost as much, especially if you're in a STEM field, as some of those textbooks. So that's a big issue. Also, it's not uncommon. I was a high school teacher. I actually hated the American history textbook I was supposed to use, in large part because it was 12 years old. And it's still what we had. That's how schools tend to make things last and how they stretch their dollars. Well, that is not an accepted practice in higher ed nearly as much as it is in certain K-12 districts. And so they can't get the books one year and reuse them as often as they could. Also, if it's something that the school would have and the students would use, the students can't write in them, which is pretty common for you to do. If you've got a hard copy textbook, you're going to do that at a post-secondary level. And often it might not be, so even if the district pays for the textbook, so we'll get to, in a minute, we'll get to a nice chart of how each state handles this. And it is different in each state how the cost of the textbooks are handled. But one of the common models is the state will pay the tuition or discount it, but the school district covers the cost of the textbooks. Well, that is a real imposition on many school districts, especially if they're offering a lot of concurrent enrollment opportunities. It becomes a huge cost for them that they never really budgeted for, and it's difficult for them to anticipate. So that's another important consideration. And I will say we do have evidence from our research of there are states in our 12 among our 12 member states where that's precisely the funding mechanism. And what we've had are, those sideline conversations, because that's where you get the real information. They're like, well, we've kind of shifted which courses we offer because we can't afford some of those STEM textbooks. So now we're getting into even a different type of equity just in which courses are offered. We have plenty of teachers, we have plenty of classrooms, but our district will not pay for those expensive textbooks. So, like I said, it's locally determined sometimes, it's determined at the state level, and it becomes very complex. So, with that in mind, 2 years, well, it's 3 years ago now, we did some research where we dove down into state policies. This is on the MEC website, and I'm going to give you a QR code in just a second. But you can begin to see different ways that states organize who pays for the textbook. In 2021, when this part of the research was done, among the 50 states, students themselves pay for textbooks in 13 states. In 16 states, it's a local decision. So the school district might decide to pay for them. They might subsidize them. You don't know. The students might also end up paying for them. In 20 states and DC, the policy is silent on who pays for the textbooks. So then again, you don't know what to envision. You don't know what to expect. And we do want to say, so far, these policies have not changed. We have had repeated conversations with NASEP about kind of pushing for some clarity in certain states on these things to kind of clean up this situation. If you want to pull up, there's the QR code to the study. And I'm happy to take a moment here, pull it up and look up what the policy is in your state. You might already know, but I think it's very helpful for you to be able to see, and it's not uncommon for people not to know. So please don't feel any compunction about that. So I'll give you a moment to do that. And tell me if it's working. This is my first foray into QR codage. So, is it working? Okay. So who pays in California, Nick? It is, yeah. So you might, I don't. Okay, all right. Yes.
I'm actually a trustee of community college.
Yes.
And what I've learned is it is, I think it must be local because certain districts and certain high schools, it depends on the contract.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, there you go. Anyone else have one?
That's my
No, and that's very common in a lot of states. It does get right down to the articulation agreement between the state and the institution, and then the institution and the high schools. Don't know. Yes, I know. Yes, I agree. Did anyone else find one that you want to share with us? Yes.
Which changed how we do enrollment, and so we now, I think it's a shared cost between the local school districts and college.
Okay.
All zero cost for career and college ready.
Got it. Okay. And yes, in the new report, this will be updated. So again, for those of you who came in a little bit later, I am not the PI on this. The PI was not able to be here and can't even virtually be here because she is ill. And so a lot of the specifics of I won't have here, but the report will be coming out later this fall. So, okay. So, I mean, I don't have to, you're a smart group, right? You do OER all the time. It's not hard to see what the potential benefits are and how these are really definitely issues of equity for the students. One of the things we're trying to figure out is what are all of the ways that the costs of textbooks are hurting the dual enrollment space. Like I said, is it which courses you offer? It's how many you offer. It's which students get to take them. I mean, it's everything across the board. And so in that first study, we really just looked at what do different states say and what happens. In this study, we're getting much more granular and we're going into specific contexts and finding out these things. Hence the information about, yeah, well, we used to offer more STEM courses, but we couldn't afford to. We're doing lots of English courses and lots of things that, were published over 100 years ago, and therefore we can get really cheap. So, and we're also beginning to look at the specifics of why people decide to make the change. Because again, as you well know, it could be someone in dual enrollment who would be initiating this. It could be someone in an OER advocate. And that's the other thing about dual enrollment. It does not live in the same place in any state. So for example, in Minnesota, where MEC is located, dual enrollment lives in the Office of Higher Education. In Iowa, it lives in the Department of Education. And it's all over the place in a bunch. In Michigan, it lives nowhere because Michigan doesn't have a Department of Higher Ed, and it's not in their Department of Ed. So I'm just trying to give you some examples where you're never sure where you're going to be able to get in there and get a lever to get this started. But lots of people are doing little things all over. So what we wanted to do is the things that we're beginning to hear about. Like I said, I'm not going to go into the specifics here, but I will talk about some of the things that are beginning to bubble up for us. We do see some potential levers, some potential ways that you can go ahead as OER advocates and people who work in your environments and try to bring about some change. So one, of course, is to work with the strategic plan at the state higher ed entity if you have one. They generally will have a plan. I will say, like, again, in Michigan, they don't because they don't have a central entity. But if there's a plan, it would be looking for ways that OER is either already in the plan and can we apply it to dual and concurrent enrollment, or if it's not, is equity part of the plan? And could this be one of the measures, one of the ways that we show that outcome? And there are all kinds of ways to accomplish that. Obviously, there's OER advocacy, there are state level structures you can take advantage of, and there are a lot of different opportunities for funding and support. So I will give you an example. Louisiana has a very assertive state plan for higher ed and for K-12 education. And so they wrote one of the great big open textbook pilot grants. I always forget what, because it's not a pilot anymore. Just that confuses me. Anyway, they got a huge grant to do just this, to get OER into concurrent enrollment settings. So it's a 3-year grant. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what is going to come out of that. I think it's over next year. Another way that you can another thing to think about too is that all of your levers need to be interrelated. It doesn't do you a lot of good to get into and kind of crack open and try to align with that state level plan if you also don't have the authority to do that, and if you don't have the funding to do that. So there are a lot, and if you don't even have a repository, that's one of the things that I find to be very, very helpful in the states I work with, where they have a repository that they can share with each other, and where either you can go onto it and you can go to the K-12 side and you can go to the higher ed side, and there's some alignment, that's better. And a lot of them, and this is where I'll get Abby to talk about what they're doing in Iowa, and what they've done to an extent in California is begin to link those together. So I will pause, and Abby, would you like to share what y'all are doing?
Thank you. This is an early preview and not to be taken as everything we're doing. But one thing we're doing specifically in the Iowa OER action team is we're developing a set of aligned OER to specific common dual enrollment courses. We pulled data on what the 10 most common dual enrollment courses are across the state of Iowa, as well as most common transfer courses because they are related, but not necessarily the same. And we're looking at specifically the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges list of aligned OER as a starting point to jump off of, as well as adopted OER on our campuses and from school systems like Oregon State. Thank you if anyone in this here's from Oregon, for all of their already aligned, adopted, and supported OER, so we can get an idea of, for each of these courses, are there already OER we can support using? And then we can provide this as a list, because the hardest part for a lot of these faculty is there anything for this? Who uses this? How do we get started?
Right, and what would it look like?
Similar to the California list, I am similar to the California list and the Oregon lists. We're hoping for a sort of database where you can search for my course, what I teach, and see where the recommendations are.
Awesome. Well, we want to help if we can at MEC. I'll give you some other examples from MEC states. In Ohio, they have built out through their scholarly library network called Ohio Link. They've built out now, I think, 28 courses that are the most common transfer courses. They're the universal, and they're the universal transfer courses. You know, I think they have common course numbering, and they tend to overlap with the most commonly offered concurrent enrollment courses. And so they've gone in and they've built the course around various OER, and they have the aligned outcomes, the aligned concepts. Now, have they been universally or largely adopted yet in those OER, in those settings? No, because it's up to the faculty to do that. But if a faculty member were to say, hey, we're launching these OER courses in French language, I don't know, that's not what's a general transfer? Let's see, sociology 101. We're going to do that. They would have a place to go and look at a fully built out course that is OER supported with multiple OER options. So it's looking for the things that already exist and then apply, because those were never created with dual enrollment in mind, but they can be easily picked up and put into that space. So that's another way to go about some of this. Well, okay, I already talked about this integration with the strategic plan. It's also really important to, if you have some good mechanisms, to do some data collection and do data collection on OER implementation in the state, but also to do some data collection on concurrent enrollment. Now, this might sound really, okay, you probably are in states where there's a varying degree of reporting on OER. But when you begin to work in dual enrollment, I don't know, intuitively you want to say, well, surely there's a lot of good data, right? It's mainly public high schools. It's probably mainly community colleges and therefore public higher ed. I will tell you that the data ecosystem for dual enrollment is a hot mess. And that's another report we have coming out in the next 9 months. We're actually going to the 12 MEC states and just looking for which data are collected, where are they made available, and does anyone use them for anything? And boy, by the time you get to number 3, it's almost non-existent. So they're collecting data just to have it. They're not collecting data that really leads to anything connected to a strategic plan. It's a set of metrics that they decided on ages ago. Thank you, 10 minutes. And they collect it every year. They put it in a PDF and they park it on a website somewhere. And that's the extent to which they're using data to make informed decisions about concurrent enrollment. So that's the first thing is, do you actually have good actionable data about what's going on in your state for dual and concurrent enrollment? And then to the degree that you also have good data about OER implementation, it's trying to bring those together. And I'll just say, these are the kinds of things, as Abby was saying, we've been working on in MEC for a long time now, which is bringing together folks in each of our state teams to say, hey, you work at higher ed and you work at this library thing and you do this, you're at the, K-12, let's cross those streams and make some good things happen, because it is those types of conversations that will get these things rolling. Let me go through, obviously, OER advocacy. Y'all are hearing a bunch about that. I don't need to go through that. You'll have access to this. And then some type of oversight. Again, you would think that there's good oversight, at least for concurrent enrollment in a state. You'd be wrong in most cases. We would love for there to be great oversight for OER, and in some states, there's beginning to be that, and that's wonderful. But it is, again, it's getting in there and making sure you're monitoring what's going on and you're bringing this high impact practice to bear. So obviously there's funding, support. It's really important to think about that local implementation, because it does vary so much. And okay, I want to give you time to ask questions and share and talk. So do go ahead and look me up and you'll be able to access this. Well, these slides will come through here, but I have all kinds of webinars, I have all kinds of research reports, and the two that I've already mentioned will be forthcoming in the next 6 and 9 months. So lots of good examples. So, all right, I'd love to hear from you, where you're from and how close the OER world and the dual enrollment worlds are.
Hi, I'm Lisa Petrides. I'm from ISKME and OER Commons, but I have another hat, which is an elected official with the San Mateo County Community College District. So both as a trustee whose responsibility for governance and budgeting and all those good things, I'm also a pretty severe advocate of OER. And it's amazing to me that just as a trustee, and I've been there 4 years, bringing these conversations to the forefront is so important. People just they almost thank me sometimes, although of course then when they understand what they have to do, there's then there's the politics and the course and there's many things involved. But I was surprised to know that this had never been a conversation at all about OER and dual enrollment. And so now, and I don't know what data there are out there, Abby, it's interesting. I know you're talking about Iowa, but I've been asking, what are the top 10 dual enrollment courses that we're even offering, and let's make sure that we have that OER as pathways. So there's a whole host of things, and this is a little bit more general about OER. Dual enrollment, college promise programs, equity initiatives. There's all these areas that we could be connecting OER to. Dual enrollment is a huge one, and almost an easy one. It's kind of a no-brainer, because either the high schools are having to pay this, or the college. Even when I asked my administrators initially, they're like, I'm not sure if we pay for those textbooks. So it's like, well, let's find out. Why shouldn't we be prioritizing making sure that we have OER pathways for our dual enrollment? So that's what's happening, at least in California community colleges.
That's wonderful to hear that and have that insight. And I would say it's not unlike it is in most states, at least the Midwest, where I know things pretty well. When you do, I do various presentations to various boards and state things. And again, whenever I bring up the two in the same sentence, they're like, oh, well, that's a good idea. Never thought of that. We're still at that stage. So, though there were 2 sessions on OER and dual enrollment today. So, that's 2 more sessions than we've ever had. So I'm happy about that. And we are presenting at NASEP, of course, on this topic in 2 weeks. So
One of those presentations, it ended up being a recorded
Oh, okay.
one because it was actually a combination from somebody from my team. And what I can tell you is under the Go Open
Oh, yeah.
moniker,
Yeah.
which is the K-12 side, that's
Yes.
where that dual enrollment initiative is coming from. So again, it's great to see that we can approach this from the higher ed side or from the K-12 side.
Absolutely. Yes. And honestly, that distinction is still one of the most difficult things about learning materials, education in general. I mean, I like to tell, and like I said, I've been working in the whole teacher credentialing space for a long time. And so then I often have people in the same room saying, well, we're good teachers. Just because I don't have all that doesn't mean I'm not a good teacher. And they're like, but you got to have this much graduate stuff, and it's this. And yeah, I need Muppets, but they are conversations that will evaporate eventually. Within 20 years, we're not going to have this distinction. And that's going to help quite a bit. But for right now, there is still that divide. And so OER I see as a great bridge. And so Abby's heard me say this. My dream is that by the time they get to post-secondary ed age, they're so used to using and finding open resources and interacting with the text and thinking about the conditional nature of knowledge and knowing and creating knowledge, that there will then be this huge student demand that cannot be ignored. And I think I do see that coming. I think all of us are I know I am. I'm just anxious. I want to speed it up. So let's hope. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's hear those. Thank you, Abby. Awesome. Yeah, I can get you connected with your regional compact and my counterparts there to help you with all this stuff. Thank you for focusing on this topic near and dear to my heart and work. I focused on some of Louisiana's dual enrollment OER work as well as national data this morning in the session now posted here. Awesome, thank you. We'll look at that. I love it. I'm very interested in this work. I started my career as a high school librarian, now a college librarian, so I'm very interested in the overlap. Me too. Abby, do you have links to the Oregon list? Yes, Abby always has links. K-12 districts K-12 school districts where I am from definitely don't have the resources to do things about this on their end. It's almost as if I feel like I can have more impact on high school students as a college librarian than I did as a high school librarian because I'm empowered by my institution to support OER. Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. We need to be working on I've thought about this. There are OER librarian training programs, like amazing ones. Abby's gone to those, but we need them for high school. Like for like I said, eventually that boundary between pre and post secondary will erode. But for now, I do see it. We need to do that in our team. I need to do that for some more high school people. So we give a lot of scholarships to like Creative Commons and other types of training. But we've never done it for someone in a high school, but we should. Okay, what else have we got? At the University of Washington, we are working on a project called Languages Without Borders. We are trying to get dual enrollment for language courses, especially for less commonly taught languages and heritage languages of students in our high schools. That is awesome, great. For this, OER for language textbooks or resources would be vital. One of our Portuguese professors chose to do his Portuguese textbook as OER. I love that. All right, 2 minutes. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Are there more comments? If you are interested in heritage languages, I encourage you to reach out to David Ernst at the Open Education Network. He's been doing work with indigenous populations in the Upper Great Lakes area and doing a lot of indigenous, well, not just heritage, but indigenous language OER up there. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I really appreciate the way you stay focused on the topic. I'm Haitian, and I did my studies in Haiti. Since a long time, I was thinking about the dual enrollment because they ask you to make 16 years at school, and after to put you in a position to look where's your gifts, talents most oriented, and know what will be my subjects at school. Do you have some advice to someone who would want to resist against this idea and propose a better way in the education field? Frank, we should talk. We definitely should talk. Just call me. This is a pet peeve of mine. So, all right, I'm done. Thank you all.